Kristen was going to come by, Kristen and Ryan was going to come by with something for us. And I told her I would be able to open the door so we
Hey, hey, Kevin, this is Rick. Can you bring the attendees over? Oh, there you go. Never mind. Thank you.
It's now 6 o'clock and I see we have a quorum present. So I'll call the Snoqualmie City Council Roundtable meeting of September 28th to order. Jody, could you please take the roll call?
Councilmember James.
Here.
Councilmember Ross.
Here.
Councilmember Holloway.
Here.
Councilmember Mayhew. Councilmember Mayhew.
Here.
Councilmember Lassay.
Here.
Councilmember Sundwall.
Here.
Councilmember Shepherd. Here. Mayor Larson.
I'm here. Thank you, Jody. So with that, again, we're going back to discussing the main budget issues for the general fund, and I'll turn it over to Robert.
Thank you, Mayor. So right now, tonight, we're looking for any council feedback again to wrap up the discussions here. We also have a worksheet that we're going to show you that I'm going to send out that has the detail on the other funds that you'll be ultimately approving through the ordinance. Again, on some of those funds, we're talking about like the special revenue funds, the hotel motel tax fund, for example, REIT, and some of the other funds that we transfer to capital. So funds that are not actively operating per se, but funds that you'll be voting on eventually with the levy, with the property tax levy and the final budget votes in the next couple of months here. So just to rehash what we've looked at before, nothing has changed. We have not changed this since the meetings, but I know that, so in the last 2 weeks, this sheet has not changed. We did have some follow-up questions, I know, from some council members, and we did have one where there was a worksheet. And those are the items that we would like to discuss with the council tonight to see what your direction is. And Mayor, I believe Councilmember Shepherd has a question.
So I noticed that for the RRFB signals, it was originally budgeted for $1.5 million, and we're going to be spending in the neighborhood of $300,000. Does that mean that we have an additional $1+ million that has not been budgeted for 2021? And
so, sorry, go ahead.
And if so, can we look at the possibility of buying a ladder truck?
So Councilmember Shepherd, again, this goes back to the separate pots of money. And so the item you're talking about is a non-utility CIP program item. So any move with that would actually be a separate discussion on the non-utility CIP, which again, we're looking to have in January, February. So that is not operating budget, that's capital budget. So again, tonight's discussion just revolves around the council's tentative approval of a non-capital operating governmental budget. So we'll get to that, but we'll get to that in January.
In other words, we have far more capital needs and capital programmatic needs than there is money. $14 million of resources to $30 million of need, or 30 million plus. So to Robert's point, the net savings on this particular project just means there's more capital projects, including the ladder truck, that can be considered in our conversations in January. Councilmember Holloway and Councilmember Mayhew.
The other part to concern is a large chunk of that money were state grant and development mitigation that are targeted for that purpose that cannot be repurposed for a fire truck. So that money is not available to expend in that manner.
That's an excellent point. In fact, Robert, could you clarify for the council? I think that's coming up on the agenda anyway, later in the evening. What proportion of that $300,000 is being paid for out of developer mitigation? Or Councilor Holloway, you may remember that offhand.
Yeah, Drew, did you want to jump in here?
Well, sure. So in essence, it's roughly a third that the city would fund, roughly a third that a TIB grant would fund, and roughly a third that mitigation fees would fund. Now, when we had established the $1.5 million budget, basically, for 2 transportation projects, the rapid flashing, or at least anticipated full signal at the River Street and SR 202. And then in addition to that, a potential signal down around King and SR 202, we had established a $1.5 million budget at that time. However, the scope has been reduced, and so we've reduced the budget in kind for the most part. All of that was contemplated when we brought forward the non-utility CIP over the summer. So keep that in mind too. And I think Councilmember Holloway makes an excellent point. And that back then we had actually, and when I mean back then, I mean September of last year, when we had first adopted the non-utility CIP, anticipated roughly $500,000 of a TIB grant. Through this process, we're only going to receive $100,000 because the scope is reduced. And so that's money that we're not necessarily going to receive because we have a reduced scope. And so we only applied for what we needed to apply for from the state for the most part. So in essence, that's not necessarily money that we received in the bank because we never actually asked for $500,000 in total. So just keep that in mind too. Thank you.
Councilmember Mayhew.
So I just want to beg my fellow council members. We have an incredibly tight agenda to get from here to the end of the year and pass our budget. This roundtable is to discuss the governmental operating budget. We've just spent a whole bunch of time talking about capital items coming out of the capital budget. I beg us, please, can we please focus on getting through the governmental operating budget tonight so that we can then turn our attention to utilities, which is going to take a lot of our attention and be very tough for us to get through. And then can we plan to get back to the utilities, back to the capital budget, the governmental capital budget in January, as we've discussed doing. That governmental, there is a lot to discuss there. There's ladder trucks, there's pools, there's all kinds of things that lots of us would love to have. Some of us will think we must have, and for which there just isn't enough money. It's going to be tough. Please, can we not get off track? Can we just focus on the governmental operating budget tonight, please?
I think Councilmember Shepherd had her hand up.
Yes, I would like to get some sort of a spreadsheet that explains what the, where the sources of funding were originally anticipated coming from, and what the original budget amount was, what the final amount is going to cost.
Point of order. This has nothing to do with the budget we're discussing, and I believe that's what we're supposed to be doing tonight.
I'm not allowed to ask these questions.
As usual, or as is frequent, it has nothing to do with what we're talking. It's not germane to the conversation. It's not a bad question. It has nothing to do with this meeting.
I think the budgets do interact. I think that some of this money that is paying for this does come from the general fund.
That would be concerning.
It's the way it's spelled out.
So I had a point of order, Mayor. Are you going to rule on that or not?
Sorry, is the mayor still on the meeting? Mayor, can you hear me?
Mayor dropped off.
Yeah, I don't see him. I don't see him.
Is Jody Warren on the meeting?
Jody should be here yet.
I am here, sir.
Jody, when the mayor is not able to run the meeting, who takes over running the meeting under our council rules of procedure?
That would go to the Mayor Pro Tem.
All right, until the mayor returns, if there's no objection, I'll take over facilitating the meeting and ruling on Councilmember Sundwall's motion. We will not have any further discussion of this item during this portion of the meeting, but when the regular meeting starts at 7 o'clock, we will be taking up this matter that Councilmember Shepherd was referring to. And so please, Councilmember Shepherd, bring up your thoughts at that time. But now let's move on with the meeting. Any other questions? If not, we'll go back to Mr. Hammoud. Any other questions? If I can see how, let's see that. Seeing none, Mr. Hammoud, going back to you. Mr. Hammoud, are you on the meeting?
I'm sorry, I was on mute.
Okay.
Drew, could you go ahead and put up the fund schedule that I just sent out?
Yes.
And I'm sorry, I'm going to jump around just a little bit just for the sake of time because we only have 49 minutes here. Mayor is back on. I think I need to let him back.
Am I the only one that crashed out of the meeting?
You are, Mayor, but we'll go ahead and move on. Go ahead, Mr. Hammoud. And
Yeah,
Mr.
so-
Larson, turn the meeting back over to you.
The Mayor Pro Tem had asked us to put together a schedule that broke out the transfers out and also showed some of the other funds that we don't get into the detail with per se on our meeting. So what you're going to see here on this is your first line is your base appropriations for 2020. And again, this is by function. So if this schedule looks familiar to you, this is the same format that you passed the budget last time, the operating budget 2 years ago. It's also the same format we've amended the budget on, the same format that we've done the quarterly reports on. And so what we did was we tried to match that. Tonight, we're focusing again on expenditures. We will have a revenue update, again, as I mentioned before, in a year-end 2020 forecast at the end of October, once we get the August revenues in. And also get the property tax revenues in. We had some preliminary numbers just come in just before this meeting. So that will be coming in the next month in our schedule. But you can see here, the estimated expenditures, what we did was we broke out transfers out. So for example, with Snoqualmie Police, if you look down there, that's the first transfer out, you see that 235,869. What we did there is that's actually a transfer that we're putting into the North Bend Fund. It is, you remember 2 meetings ago and 1 meeting ago for those that were in the Public Safety Committee, this is the money above and beyond the contract with North Bend as far as the overhead and the services needed to support the police function for North Bend. So that 235,000 is city money. That's what the city is actually contributing for the first year. Second year, it goes down a little bit. That's based on the built-in inflationary increase into the contract for North Bend for 2022. So pretty much those figures are anything above and beyond the, and if everybody can mute, I'd appreciate that. I'm hearing a lot of feedback. I apologize. Those figures are above and beyond the contracted amounts approved by the City of North Bend Council and your body as well, and for each year. So 235,869 and 187,025 respectively. So we broke out those transfers from the expenditures of the department. So I hope that makes sense to everybody. Same thing with fire and emergency management. You can remember the discussion we had on the small equipment fund for fire. So that's $30,000 transfer out for 2021, and same thing, 30,000 for 2022. And Mayor Pro Tem, I think, had a question. You're muted.
Thank you. Just want to make sure. So the thing that we should understand, if we just focus on the police department item that you took us through, am I correct then that if we look at the 2021 estimated expenditures, 4.728,000 plus the 235,000 in the transfers out, the appropriation that we will vote on eventually will be those two items combined because they're both part of the appropriation. But what you're showing us here is how much of that is us authorizing a transfer of that money versus how much of that will actually be spent. Is that correct?
Correct. So the right-hand column is actually what you would be technically voting on, which is the biennial 2-year budget. So that includes the transfers out plus the expenditures. Yes.
So that's the 4 items added together. So if we look at that 9.9 million for the police, that's actually the 4 yellow items to the left of it. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Great. And so this was, I know I had made this request, and I thank you for doing this. I find this very useful. There has, I think, been some confusion in the past when we passed an appropriation because there may be a difference between the amount that we had talked about them spending for a given department versus the total amount in the appropriation. And that's because we have to authorize these kind of transfers. And so the idea is to let us all see that now. If we have any questions about it, great, let's get them out, let's get them answered so that when the appropriation shows up for us to vote on, we'll recognize, or we should hopefully recognize all the numbers and understand these pieces. What's the spending that's okay versus the transfers that we're saying, yeah, go ahead and do that.
Right. And in the packet that I sent out, and also the first cover, the worksheet packet, there's actually a list of the transfers out from the general fund, excluding that police support, but we do break out the police support in the police worksheets. And so some of that will connect. For example, you're going to see here where that money goes. So like arts activity fund, for example, that estimated expenditure is 10,000, but that's supported from a $10,000 annual transfer that we have up in that 755,287 line in non-departmental. And when we do the revenue estimates, you'll see the revenue side of this. But tonight's purpose is just looking and focusing on the expenditure side. And so also environmental sustainability, that was a 15,000 annual transfer, so we appropriated that transfer. Human services, this is something that I did want to bring up tonight just for the discussion purpose of the amount. Right now, we held it at, as we talked before, the 2020 base appropriation level, which is 232,287. And for the hotel tax, the LTAC, right now we have the appropriation at 80,000, but that is just a placeholder. That will change. 2021 and 2022 is very uncertain right now for the lodging. So that the money available is subject to change. We try to estimate being conservative at this point, but even that number could be lowered or raised by the end of the year. So that is subject to change. King County Trails Levy Fund, we are working on that. There's not an appropriation per se yet, but again, that's a special revenue fund. That is money directly from the county for specific programs. So that is not items that you can use for, say, ladder trucks or for general operations. Same thing with, so real estate excise tax fund, the REIT fund. We did discuss this in the CIP back in May, and you approved those transfers that are there, that 896,005. That also includes the transfer to streets, 200,000, and also transfer to debt service. And again, REIT will be one of those other items that you would further discuss when we get to the CIP discussions in January and early next year. Drug Enforcement Fund, if you remember, we've had a discussion on this where these are money that, again, is restricted funds. They can only be used for certain programs in the police department. This is seizure money for the most part. So with that fund, we did agree that we're going to appropriate the fund balance each year. So what we'll do is at the, we have a cleanup budget amendment going into 2021, we'll actually appropriate the fund balance. But right now we don't have, obviously, the year-end fund balances yet. So we will be coming back to that item as well. And we're also had agreed to do the same thing with Fund 11, the Fire Equipment Replacement Fund, to give the fire department discretion when they need to purchase equipment. We are going to appropriate the fund balance of that fund each year. And so again, we'll do that at year end. And riverfront land acquisition, some of that was a mix of grants. And so again, that's another fund that does have restricted monies in it. And then Community Development Fund, you could see here that $2.1 million, that's the annual expenditures for planning and building. Then we have the debt service funds, and just a side note on Fund 211, that is the only place here. There is some commingled utility expenses. There is a utility issue in that fund for the debt service, but just to make it simple, we didn't want to break that out because we want to make sure we're showing the fund and people don't get confused. So that's the only place in this schedule where there's any utility money at all. Equipment replacement, you can see, as we talked about before, and I think Mayor Pro Tem I wanted to discuss, I think, one item on this, so we were prepared for that discussion as well. That's 1.435 the first year, 1.45 the second year. IT fund, you could see 1.623. And they were also asked about risk management fund. That is subject to change. We just actually got some labor information in today. So that is subject to change based on the final rates we get for insurance by the end of the year. Right now we budgeted 570,000 this year, and then for 21 and 595 for 2022. Facilities maintenance fund, you can see 524, 535, and then a transfer out for the capital projects. And we did discuss that in Parks and Public Works Committee. Councilmember Holloway has a question. Councilmember Holloway? I think he's muted.
Unmute button's hard to find. Going back to your comment on the debt service funds.
Sure.
That is the full amount for the debt service, which is actually serviced by both utility and general fund?
No, so that particular fund 211 does have a small piece of utilities money in it for debt service. And Drew, did you want to elaborate a little bit on that?
Right. So in essence, back in 2011, we replaced basically utilities, but as well as streets. And on top of that, the city hall was built through this bond back then. So in essence, we're paying back the city hall portion of the debt, as well as the streets component, which is paid for primarily through REIT. And then we're also transferring some funds into this in order to pay back the debt service on all that utility underground work that we did back then as well. So in essence, it's encompassing about 3 different elements basically, and it's all flowing through this one fund.
Okay. The inflows will show as revenue in another section where this is the expenditure for that debt service.
Correct.
I want to make sure I'm getting, eventually when I get down to the bottom of here's the money you have left, or here's your negative, here's your debt you've resulted this year, that I'm not commingling those funds at that state, that I can parse it out, but okay, understood.
Councilmember Shepherd.
Yeah, so the debt service fund is, you're saying this is just part of it or all of it?
So in essence, the utilities would be paying back a portion of the dollar amount that you see here for 2021 and 2022.
It's part of the amount that's owed for that period?
Right, so we built the assets, right, back in 2011. We're gonna be paying this bond back over time. In essence, because we built utility assets as a part of that bond, we have an obligation to use rate revenue in order to fund the debt service payments on this bond.
Basically a mortgage payment.
So will we, in the other budget that we look at, also be looking at another coded debt service fund?
So for example, when we get to the utility section, there are going to be specific utility revenue bond funds that we're going to be looking at.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, to clarify, for example, on the City Hall, Drew, it's basically saying that because City Hall serves enterprise fund or utility departments, there's a portion of the City Hall that should be paid for out of utility funds.
Oh,
Right?
so I would say, for example, we had rebuilt Falls Avenue, right? For example, and replaced a number of water, sewer mains underneath Falls Avenue during that time frame. So as a result, the utility rate revenue that we're collecting nowadays is paying that portion back on the debt service, the overall debt service for this bond that we took out in order to complete that work.
Okay. Councilor Mayhew, did you have a question? I saw your hand up and then went back down again.
Yes, I was just wanted to wait until the debt service conversation was over. But I wanted to bring up something on the, it's on the screen right now. It's Fund 501. And just to remind the council, so this governmental accounting is kind of in a number of ways can be a real head scratcher. So the first yellow column, the one that at the bottom, at the very bottom of the page says 25815061. Up at the top of the page, that's headed 2021 expenditures. So you might think that what that means is that we're going to spend 25 million, or that this is proposing to spend 25 million in governmental operating funds. And that's actually not the case. And the reason, one of the reasons that that's true is how the 500 funds work. So you can see just above it, the total of the internal service funds is 4.6 million. So here's how these governmental, these internal service funds work. Whatever we spend out of the internal service fund, the revenue to pay for it is a charge up to the other funds. So in essence, you see it twice. It's a doubled up expense. The first time here where we authorize them to actually spend the money, and the second time up in the other funds that are having to pay for that. So in particular, what I want to talk about tonight is part of that 1.435 million that's on Fund 501 for 2021. Some of that is, for example, for new police cars. And the amounts that we spend there on police cars, the funding for police cars gets charged up to the police budget up above. So it's not exactly the same amount, because this is how much we'll spend in 2021, or that they're proposing. The amount that gets charged up to the fund above is the charge to replace the charge to replace all of the vehicles that the police department has, but divided over the life of those police vehicles. So each of them are purchased in different years, and they have a schedule, city staff does, where they just track all of these, and they schedule out all the years that they have to be charged out in order so that when it's time to have the replacement vehicle, we've accumulated the money. So I tell you this because if you look at Fund 501, last year in 2020, or I guess that's the current year, they proposed to spend 1.3 million. So this is one of the few areas, maybe perhaps the only area, maybe one of the only few areas where the amount for 21 is proposed higher than it was for 2020. So that really caught my attention. And the thing that I've been trying to focus on, is there any additional opportunity where we could squeeze down that spending, because that in turn would lower the charges up to our operating fund departments. And when I think about the police department in particular, the police department, along with all of the city departments, are being asked to freeze COLAs. We either may do that, or we may have to have layoffs or furloughs. We're looking at very difficult personnel decisions. And you know, where we have unions, we're struggling with the unions. I know the administration is in discussion with them about how best to get through this, and this is tough. So anything we can do to relieve the pressure there can translate through to helping us retain our staffing levels. So I looked into this 501 fund in particular, and all of these 500 level funds were discussed with the F&A committee. And so that whole schedule that I described for the police department actually exists for every piece of equipment that the city has. So they had already this year dialed the scheduled equipment replacements way back, way lower than what they the schedules had originally called. So they looked at different pieces of equipment and said, you know what, can we get by for another year or two without replacing this? And in a lot of cases, they found a way they thought they could do that. But there are some cases where they can't. And so that's the revised proposal they brought to us. But in particular, in the police department, they're scheduled in this number to replace 8 police vehicles in 21 and 22. And so my question was, is there any way that we could squeeze that down? Could that be less? And so the reason that I'm, again, just, well, I explained the reason for trying to squeeze that down. And really, is there any way that in total we can get that 501 fund spending lower and really help out with all the pressure on salaries and everything else up in Fund 001? So there is a proposal kicking around, and I'll maybe ask if Mr. Hammoud could talk about this, or whoever's appropriate, but that would take it from 8 police vehicles over the 2-year period down to 4. That would mean 4 of the vehicles that we had previously planned to replace would get pushed out to 2023, and that would translate through to some savings for this biennium. And so that was kind of at my request, and that's the reason for my request. And Mr. Hammoud, did I guess the one thing I'll say is, well, why didn't the city just, you know, propose something lower? And I think their feeling was, especially when it comes to things like fire vehicles and police vehicles, they want our input on all the vehicles, but those in particular, they want to make sure that we understand the requests that we're making and the choices that are being made if something like that happens. So their answer was, well, feel free to make that request as a council member, but you know, and then let's see what the council thinks of that. So I think with that, Mr. Hammoud, are you able to explain the numbers that you guys came up in response to my request?
Yeah, we have a scenario to show you, but first, I believe Councilmember Ross has a question.
So are the 8, are those for Snoqualmie only, or are those also North Bend? Because I know that they had older cars that needed to be replaced.
This is Snoqualmie only. So Drew, do you want to go ahead and I do appreciate Parks and Public Works and Drew did a really good job this week, kind of brainstorming this idea and what it would entail. One caveat I will say with this proposal is you do run the risk, obviously, of deferred maintenance coming up or additional deferred maintenance on vehicles. especially those vehicles that are already over 100,000 miles. So there could be some increased operating expense that could happen in this above and beyond what our forecast is for that. But go ahead, take it away, Drew.
So I just want to revise your previous comment. Basically, there is one North Bend vehicle that we have left on the budget proposal for the next year, for the next 2-year period, for example. So as everyone's been discussing, we have removed 4 police department vehicles from the list. In essence, what that means for us is the amount that we would propose to budget for 2021 would come in less than the 2020 adopted budget. And then similarly for 2022, if you can see on your screen here, what we would propose for 2022 would come in less than what we had appropriated for 2020. So in essence, as a result of subtracting those 4 police vehicles, we have reduced our capital equipment adjustment line here that you see under proposed department changes. It is now basically flat with 2020. And as a result of this, our proposed 2021 budget and 2022 budget will come in less than the 2020 appropriated budget. So in essence, instead of purchasing 12 vehicles or pieces of equipment for the next 2-year period, we would be purchasing 8 vehicles or pieces of equipment for the next 2-year period. In addition, as a result of subtracting 4 police vehicles from the ER&R division operating budget, we would also reduce the police department chargeouts by approximately $24,000 in 2021 and $41,000 in 2022. And so, in essence, this is the alternative to what we had proposed initially, and we would appreciate your feedback, Council.
I would also appreciate giving Perry an opportunity to provide input. Councilor Sunderland.
Yeah, I'd sure love to hear the downside because that does not feel like a lot of money savings.
Okay. Perry, did you want to weigh in?
Hello, Council. Obviously, we held over buying vehicles last year as well to try and make sure that the budget was right. This area is not under my watch, if you will, but I will tell you that police vehicles, 5 years, 100,000 miles is a standard. We got cars out here right now that are 130 to 150,000 miles. If you're talking about a savings of roughly $25,000 a year, I think that's not very much to talk about officer safety and the type of vehicles that they have to respond to calls for service. So obviously, starting tonight, I'm going to become more involved in our vehicle information and the process of acquiring new vehicles. I do have experience in it. I had to manage 200 vehicles where I came from. So I think I should be able to handle 8.
Councilor Sunwell, you still have your hand up?
Yeah. That is, as to me, just in my experience with working with Chief Phipps so far since he's been here, that's as close to I don't know, disagreement about moving forward on this as I've heard him voice. I would really, I love that Jim looked at it, or Councilmember Mayhew looked at it. I'm not sure I'm supportive of it.
Councilmember Holloway.
Well, and I guess I'm curious what the policy prior was 5 years, 100,000 miles, or you replace at end of warranty. We're not taking these out. Eventually we will replace them. So they're still in the pool, just at a different time. Is the policy now warranty plus 1 year, plus 2 years? How much additional time are we keeping these 4 vehicles?
Yeah, it's my understanding, usually, particularly for public safety vehicles, try to cycle them out at the end of their powertrain warranties.
Right.
But Robert or Drew, could you speak to that question? Or?
Well, so all that we've done so far at this point is to defer them out to the next biennium, basically, which would be in 2023 for the most part. So in essence, it's a 2-year deferral at this time.
2-year deferral.
So it's not a change in policy, it's just the responding to the economic or the financial crisis right now with COVID.
Yes, correct.
Councilmember Summo.
How many miles a year on average do we put on a vehicle?
Don will tell you 20,000 is the average per vehicle, 20,000.
So we're talking about adding $40,000 miles to a vehicle and a 2-year deferment. Is that correct?
Yes, roughly that would be correct.
Councilmember Mayhew. Could I please ask?
Yeah, well, it depends which vehicle. If it was vehicles are being bought in the second year, then it's only adding 20,000. I think I agree with the concerns that the other council members are expressing, and I particularly agree with the point that well we're all agreeing with Chief Phipps on this. I think I guess I'm not convinced that 100,000 a car at 95,000 and a police car at 105,000 are necessarily and even if you have to replace a transmission, 5,000 is a lot less than 20,000 a year. But I think that's not really where I'm focused. I'm just focused on this notion that if we're really tightening the belt, which we are all over the city, then I'm just when we're asking officers to take to forego COLAs or take furloughs, I just think sort of buying 8 new vehicles somehow just gives me a little bit of a head scratch. But on the other hand, if the reality is that, look, when it comes to police vehicles, you just can't stretch these, then that's the reality. And so I think, if Chief Phipps were to tell us, look, 100,000 is the max, I sort of wonder, oh my God, how do we get to current vehicles 150, 160,000? That sounds like a problem. But anyway, the point is, I think let's focus on what we need to do. And if there's no wiggle room, there's no wiggle room. But if there is, and maybe it's not 4 vehicles, maybe it's 1 vehicle. If there's any wiggle room here, I just think we're asking a lot of our staff, let's just make sure we've scrubbed this area as hard as we can. And then the answer is what we need to do for safety, for sure, of our officers, I would also support.
Councilmember, first, can I ask the host to please turn my video back on? I don't know if there were technical issues or not, but Councilmember Shepherd.
Yeah, so I've heard one person say that these cars are only running for 20,000 miles in a year. That doesn't sound right to me. I think we really need to make sure that we understand what we're talking about.
I'm sorry, what doesn't sound right? The 20,000 miles a year or the?
Yeah, 20,000 miles in a year sounds very low to me. I think that probably is a much higher number.
That is the base, Councilmember Shepherd. That's the base that Don relies on, is 20,000 miles per vehicle.
Well, as you said, Chief, if you have a police vehicle that's got 125,000 miles on it, it's 5 years old, do the math, that's pretty much 20,000 a year. So
I'm curious, is there some sort of insider information that Councilmember Shepherd has to question the fleet coordinator's mileage estimate?
I don't know.
Personal experience of driving a vehicle, that just sounds like a very small number of miles. I've put a lot more miles than that in 1 year on a car.
Yeah. Rick, did you want to add something?
Thank you, Mayor, council members. Also, when we're talking about police vehicles, fire vehicles, public safety type vehicles, especially law enforcement, you have the mileage, but you also have idle time. And idle time takes wear and tear on your powertrain as well. Police vehicles, especially, are idling all the time. They don't usually shut them off. Obviously, they need response time, so you don't want to turn a vehicle off, turn a vehicle on. So they are idling quite a bit more than your average vehicle. So sometimes they'll sit for hours and idle, as well as travel as well. So the idling is, we've heard, when you drive in the city, as opposed to driving long distance too, as well, right? So And long distance with your cars is easier on the motor rather than just, jackrabbit back and forth, what a lot of law enforcement or fire vehicles get into. But also, I just wanted to throw in there, and the chief, if he wants to, Chief Phipps wants to talk about that, but there also is the idle time for the vehicle as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Rick. Councilmember Holloway? You're muted, Councilmember Holloway.
That mute button. So I've got to ask the what if question. If one of these vehicles were to decide warranty was good and die, what's the option to return to service? Do we hand an officer a bicycle, or do we have enough resources to manage a vehicle going out?
We give them the Prius.
Maybe I'll let Perry answer that question.
I'm trying to be helpful. Go ahead, Perry.
It's a good question. If we have a car that goes down, we have to then manage the vehicles that we have. We do not have what they call a line car or pool car for when a car goes down or somebody goes to training. We do not have that luxury, if you will. So when we have a car that goes down, we then have to place officers in other officers' vehicles. So in other words, that vehicle that is now being used twice as much if a car goes down. So instead of the 20,000 miles, it's getting another added 20,000 if it goes a year. So yeah, it'll be running 24 hours a day, every day.
Councilmember Ross.
I'm not sure how we came to the number of cutting 4 vehicles. I'm wondering from the police department, if you looked at the total number of vehicles of 8, which ones of those really need to be replaced over the next 2 years, and how many can we not replace? I mean, based on safety and mileage and all the other things to consider.
As I mentioned earlier, this isn't part of my shop, but I will tell you, I just sent out an email, which is no surprise to you guys, I bet, that I am now asking for all the information in all of our vehicles. Because if I'm going to be asked the questions, I want to know the answers myself and not rely on other individuals if I'm going to be answered the question. So I will have the miles and how much it costs for maintenance and all the information that Don has, because he does keep great information and great data on every vehicle. But I'll be able to answer those hopefully next time you ask me. So I don't know those answers right now.
Yeah, my apologies, Perry. You were supposed to be briefed on that. That's my bad if I didn't confirm that you had been briefed prior to perhaps finding out about that just tonight. So. All right. Any other questions, Council, on that item? I know we're trying to wrap things up. That's maybe a minor adjustment we could make later with the council or Councilor Mayhew, since you introduced or proposed that discussion item. I know without a hard position yourself. Are you okay if we we're going to have to do some fine tuning on this as we go up to December. So maybe that's an item you could make a note that we could come back to after Perry's had a chance to look into it more himself and be more responsive to the council on questions. And
I think that'd be a great idea, Mayor. And in fact, I think certainly I got the sense all the council members would really like to hear further from Chief Phipps once he's had a chance to sort of get his mind around this data and really give us his feedback. So I think that's a great proposal, Mayor.
Yeah, because it may be that Chief Phipps is comfortable per Councilman Ross's suggestion to say, look, I feel strongly about these 6, but these 2 or this 1, I could see it going a couple more years. So, but he needs to be given the advantage to take a look at that from his department's perspective and at least weigh in on the risks there. So,
well, and it'd be nice to have what is the average failure rate at end of warranty for the transmission, and how does that rate change the subsequent years? There may be some industry data that will help us gauge what the risk really is.
Yeah, and that's a great question.
Time to failure and placed a bet in that warranty that was probably a pretty sure bet that it'd make it.
Yeah, and Rick maybe a call with some offline conversations with the Mayor Pro Tem that there were similar ones along that line that, hey, even if it cost another 5,000 or 6,000 to put a new transmission in or something, if it failed or a powertrain failed beyond warranty, that's still less expensive than putting $20,000 into the, the ER&R fund every year to replace that vehicle. And so we have to do that cost benefit ratio and then the risk and how long does it take to turn around a vehicle that might have a transmission to go out, how long would it be offline? So those are, I think, questions that, again, Perry or Don could look at. Or Rick, you can chase that stuff down, I assume.
Yeah. Well, we'll chase that down, but that that is correct as well. I do agree with Mayor Pro Tem and his analysis of we're trying to cut costs, and that we might have to come back to council with some modifications prior to December on a number of items that we're dealing with as far as personnel, union negotiations, and the possibility of having to decrease expenditures again once we have a few more answers to some of the questions that we've asked. So every little bit helps as well. So I think doing this analysis with Chief Phipps will be very productive for us. So thank you, Mayor.
Brian Kraus.
I just would like to add that we have some very accurate data on these vehicles, and we can work with the chief in this regard. We also have information regarding recently, within the last few years, surplus vehicles and the work that was performed on them before leaving the city. So you can see totals and averages of the investments that have been put into high mileage vehicles. And we'll share that information with you as we work with Perry and bring this information forward again.
And Brian, what would it take to put a light bar on a Prius? Okay.
Well,
never mind. Okay. Councilman Ray, you still have your hand up. Did you have something else to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that was the only item that I had any remaining questions about with regard to this governmental operating budget, that big spreadsheet that was put up, or the spreadsheet we had at the beginning of the meeting, or the one that, so this one sort of put into more into the format we'll eventually vote on it on. But even if we go back to the first one from tonight, this was the only question I had remaining. I've seen the adjustments that have been made out of discussions at committees and so on, and I don't have any further issues with this budget. So I am supportive of it, and I guess in the hopes of staying on our timeline, I'm hoping maybe other council members could sort of give a sense of, are we ready to move off this? And if not, what is the remaining items that council member thinks we need to address? But maybe kind of, so certainly that's my point of view, and maybe the rest of the council members could give their point of view. Then we could see if we're ready to move on next week and start in with utilities.
Okay. Councilmember Shepherd.
So we've had a couple of reminders that we're going to be having union negotiations. And I know that they're not all negotiating right now, but can we get a schedule of when they'll be coming up in conjunction with this budget timing, so that we understand what we're looking at or what we don't know as far as when we talk about budget?
Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. Councilmember Shepherd, in the spirit of time, if it would be okay with you and the council, I'd like to bring this up in our council meeting when we're talking about the final budget for if we're going to get this thing passed tonight or not. I could bring it up then. I'll give you some, I'll give the whole group just some analysis of what I've been going through now, and I'll give you the dates when the contracts are up, that type of thing. We've mentioned it before, but if that's acceptable to the council, I can bring it up in our formal council meeting as we continue discussions. That'd be okay?
That's fine with me.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Rick. All right, we have about 8 minutes left, council. Any other questions and concerns, as Councilmember Mayhew mentioned on the overall operating budget? Councilmember Ross.
I think from the community development standpoint, at our last meeting, we had a robust conversation about affordable housing and how it is removed from the budget. And how do you balance our council goals with the budget when that is one of the goals? And so our revenues this year do not allow it, and our revenues the next 2 years do not allow it if you're looking for 150,000 to 200,000. And so what we came to was that if the revenue picture improves by the end of this year, perhaps we could add it back in, or we will have further discussions about it at the council retreat.
Right, and I'll remind the council that a number of those items, including the community center that were part of the council's goals and objectives, were upon agreement put aside given the financial crisis that started in the end of 2019 and it were exacerbated with the COVID crisis. So I think the general agreement was to take those conversations into our retreat and into January and wrestle with those items at that time. Councilor Ross, go ahead and continue.
Well, otherwise, we didn't have any other issue with the budget. So our community development budget was fine.
Great, thank you. Councilor Shepherd.
Yes, I do want to remind everyone that we do need to do a pressure test on all of our fire hydrants. And I would like to see that worked into our budget. I understand that that would be part of the operating budget.
Okay, thank you. All right, we have about 1 minute left in order to have a 5-minute break before the regular council meeting. And by the way, I noticed there's now 3 attendees or members of the public that have joined us. So I just wanted to welcome you. And just, sorry, I should have noted at the beginning of the meeting that this is a council workshop and there's no opportunity for public comment, but there will be at the beginning of the council meeting if you want to join us for that at 7 o'clock. So council, if there's nothing else, are you okay? If there's no objection, we'll go ahead and adjourn the roundtable for.
Mayor, this is Robert. I just want to make one question to the council just to offer it before we come back to this item during the formal meeting. If there's any questions you have right now that you want Drew and I to look at really quickly, you know, we're willing to do that. If there's anything that's still on your mind right now that would help you.
All right, thank you, Robert. Again, we can take this conversation at the under committee of the whole at the regular meeting in a little bit. So with that, let's adjourn the meeting at 6:55. We'll come back and re-adjourn or start the city council meeting at 7 o'clock sharp. See everybody at 7 o'clock. Please just stay tuned in. Just maybe turn your video and audio off for now. Thank you, Rick. Thank you, Rick.
You're welcome, Mayor. Just making sure it's facing the right direction. All right. Yep, we're good.
Is there really not a timer function in this app?
That's a good question. There probably is. They've got all kinds of little bells and whistles. You dig into
We'll
it.
look into that, Councilmember Saul. That's
There is not.
There is not.
There you go.
But I'll follow up with you, Rick. There's a way to have that plug into your computer and it's a little more elegant. I'll talk to you later. Maybe I'll talk
Okay.
to you.
No, that'd be
Maybe I'll
great.
talk to Kevin and he can talk to you. Ciao.
All right. Yeah.
All right. Let me see, I'm not getting a full view of everybody here. I believe I see at least a quorum of the council. So with that, I call the Snoqualmie City Council meeting to order, and I ask the city clerk to please take the roll call.
Councilmember Jeans,
Here.
Councilmember Ross,
Here.
Councilmember Holloway,
Here.
Councilmember Mayhew,
Here.
Councilmember Lissay,
Here.
Councilmember Sandwall,
Here.
Councilmember Shepherd. Here. Mayor Larson.
I am here, thank you. Council, may I have a motion and a second to approve the agenda as presented tonight?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, a motion and a second to approve the agenda as presented. Is there any questions or discussion?
Yes, I'd like to take the warrants off the consent agenda.
Okay. Any other discussion, council? Okay, so with the warrants being removed, the consent agenda, all those in favor of the agenda as presented, say aye.
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 Those opposed, say nay. All right, motion is passed. With that, we will move on to public hearings, presentations,
Point
proclamation.
of order, Mayor?
Yes, sir.
Do we take up items that were removed from the consent agenda immediately following the consent agenda?
Correct. Okay, anything else?
No.
So under public hearings, presentations, proclamations, appointments, there is the proclamation regarding that, just noting that this is Fire Prevention Week. So please read that if you're so interested, but for the sake of a time, I'll move on to citizens' comments. Just first, a few ground rules. One, Snoqualmie citizens may have a right to have their elected representatives perform their duties on behalf of the city in an efficient and orderly manner. Therefore, comments for those who have taken the time to attend the meeting will be limited to 3 minutes each. Second, please wait to be recognized and state your name and address for the record. 3, direct your comments to the council as a whole and not to individual members. In order to protect the privacy rights of employees and to protect members of the public from legal liability, please note that this is not the appropriate venue to make complaints or accusations about an implied or named city employee or agent. Such oral comments will not be allowed, but can be submitted in writing to the city clerk. Fourth, please note that this is not a time to ask questions of the council, mayor, staff, or engage in debate. The council will quietly and respectfully listen to your concerns. So with that, I do see that there is one member of the public, Sherilyn Lux. If Kevin could please turn on her microphone and give her an opportunity to speak, that would be good. Refresh my memory. Is it 3 minutes, guys, or 3 minutes? Okay. Ms. Lux, you have, once your microphone is off, you can state your name and address for the record, and then you have 3 minutes to speak.
Ms. Lux, just unmute your microphone.
Kevin, does she need to? Okay. Ms. Lux, down in the bottom left corner, if you sort of tap on the screen, there's a little mute or a little microphone that shows up. If you hit that, it's got a red diagonal line through it. If you hit it, it should take the line off and you'll be unmuted. If you could please.
Spacebar does it too.
Yeah, all right, that's a good. Yeah, there you go. Okay, go ahead, Ms. Lux.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. I'm here to address the mishandling of sexual assault issues that are going on within our police department right now. I received by a public records request some information that shows that our police department received a 911 call from a, not from a rape victim, but from a medical facility reporting a brutal head-to-toe beating of a rape that happened in your jurisdiction in 2019. Excuse me, Mr. Mayor. And it seems that the Seattle Times won a suit against the prosecutor on, excuse me, Mayor, you're not going to violate my First Amendment rights.
I'm not Ms. Lux. I'm trying to respect you.
Go ahead and wait, Mr. Mayor. Right now, I'm going to go ahead and talk about what I'm here to talk about.
Ms.
And
Lux,
you're not going to.
We're putting the timer. We're putting the timer on.
I'm here to talk about the fact that your PD
Ms.
hid
Lux,
a
we can't-
911 call and did not act on it, Mr. Mayor.
Go
What
ahead,
do you have
Senator
to say
Clark.
about that? The fact that your PD received a phone call via 911 from a hospital facility and did not comply or respond. What do you have to say, Mr. Mayor? You had the PD.
Okay.
Chairman,
Yeah,
and to advise-
Kevin, if you could please mute the speaker for a moment. Kevin, can you mute the speaker for a moment? Yeah, well, let me, first of all, Ms. Lux, let me clarify. We could not hear you. You were very garbled. I was going to ask if you could please speak clearly into the microphone. No one was trying to take away your rights. And again, I believe Councilmember Holloway is going to say it's sort of violating the protocols of the meeting, which is you don't make unfounded accusations publicly at a meeting on the record because it could present risk for yourself for defamation. And so to protect you as well as the decorum of the chamber, I'm going to cut you off at this point because you've sort of went way beyond that line already. But again, I was trying to be respectful of you and give you an opportunity to be heard clearly. Is there any other member of the public that would like to speak at this time? And Ms. Lux, you're certainly welcome to submit writing, comments or assertions or questions in writing to an email or send them to the city clerk or the city and so forth. Great. Again, is there any other member of the public that would like to have an opportunity to speak at this time? All right, seeing none, we will move on to the consent agenda. Note that the warrants have been removed. All items listed below being acted by one motion. Action items include minutes for the September 14th, 2020 roundtable and regular council meeting. Other approvals include Agenda Bill 20084, set a public hearing before the City Council for Monday, October 12th, 2020 at 7 p.m. or soon thereafter regarding the annual floodplain management and repetitive loss plan. Do I have a motion, Council?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda as stated. Is there any discussion, Council? All right, hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, those opposed say nay. All right, motion is approved. And as Councilmember Mayhew states, per council rules and procedures, we're going to take up the item that was removed from the agenda, which was the approval of warrants. So if I could have a motion and a second to approve the warrants, to put it on the table for discussion.
Move to approve the warrants as presented.
Second.
All right, I have a motion and a second to approve warrants as presented. Is there any discussion, Council? All right, I'll go to the chair of the Finance Administration Committee first.
Sorry, just point of order first, Mayor. Do we take public comment on this or?
Oh, thank you. We could do that. Yeah. Is there a member of the public that would like to comment on the warrants at this time, just specifically the warrants? Again, for those that don't know, the way there should be at the bottom of the participant, there's a button at the bottom of the screen in the center of the screen called participants. If you click on that, actually, I'm not sure where it is for the attendees. There should be a raise hand button toward the bottom of the screen. If you click on that and raise your hand, you'll get my attention and then we can unmute you and allow you a chance to speak. So I don't see anybody wanting to speak. So Councilor Mayhew, I'll toss it back to you.
So a report to the council that the F&A committee did the procedures as called for in our council rules of procedure, including this special rules during this period of COVID when City Hall is not open. All items that were questioned by the committee have been answered, and there are no other items that we're aware of from any council member that have been questioned, and therefore I move to call the question.
All right, question has been called. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second to call the question. That ceases any debate further. We go immediately to a vote. All those in favor of calling the question say aye.
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 Those opposed say nay.
Nay.
No.
Nay.
I'm not sure if I got, it sounded like a 3-3. I don't know if I got the fourth one that went either way. So
Doesn't matter. We got 3 nays.
that's right. Jim, you've been studying that. Does the
Yes, it would
question
be
require a supermajority of five? Yeah, okay, thank you. Very good. He's been brushing up for other reasons. All right, so back to discussion on the warrants then. Councilmember Shepherd, go ahead.
Yeah, so I do not submit questions about the warrants because I don't have the opportunity to look at the warrants and the supporting documents. And I feel that this is a real lack of transparency, so I will vote no.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Holloway.
Well, I would like to submit that I did submit questions, particularly to 2 items, and got sufficient information to support, although there were minor issues, to support the expenditures, and therefore I will be voting yes and had my answers questioned, or had my questions answered. Sorry.
We question your questions too.
Yeah, that too. I know.
Councilmember Shepherd, you still have your hand. I'm sorry, round robin. I'll go to Councilmember Mayhew and then Councilmember Ross.
I would just point out, Mayor, I would have, it is against council rules of procedure for council members to criticize and call out established council procedure, which is the law of the city of Snoqualmie, saying they don't agree with that law. This is a point of order. That's not a permissible thing in these meetings.
All right, thank you. So noted and sustained. Councilmember Ross and Councilmember Shepherd.
I will say I did have a question and it was quickly responded to. These warrants also include city staff paying their payroll, and probably 100% of the time, the one council member has never voted to pay our hardworking staff.
All right, Councilmember Shepherd.
So one of the requirements for us to pay the public safety and firefighters is in order for the Civil Service Commission to certify the payroll. I have never seen a certified payroll. And I would like Council Member Mayhew to provide his precise reference to what he was referring to.
I don't see, is Bob Sturbank now? I thought Bob Sturbank might want to respond to this issue of a certified payroll.
I am here, Mayor. Thank you. We've had this conversation many times before. The statute to which Councilmember Shepherd is referring that provides for Civil Service Commission certification of certain payroll, that statute does not apply because per another section of the statute that says the civil service statutes don't apply when a city has adopted its own civil service rules that substantially accomplish the purposes of the statute. The City of Snoqualmie Civil Service Commission has adopted its own rules. Those rules expressly state that they substantially accomplish the purpose of the statute, and those rules do not provide for or require certification of the Public Safety Department's payrolls. So we've had that conversation many times before. I believe Councilmember Shepherd disagrees with that provision of the statute that says it doesn't apply, but be that as it may, that's where we find ourselves.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Mayhew.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify or make sure I'm clear, if I could ask the city attorney. So therefore, can the council take it as false that in the city of Snoqualmie, the Civil Service Commission has to certify the payrolls? Can we know, so just clear answer, that's false, and if it's asserted again in the future, we can just know that that's false. Is that true?
Well, I won't label it, but I will say that it is not a legal requirement for the Civil Service Commission to certify the City of Snoqualmie payrolls.
All right, Councilmember Shepherd.
I think we need a second legal opinion.
Okay.
Can we also do that with mileage on vehicles as well?
All right, is there any further discussion on the warrants, council? All right, hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
All right, those opposed say nay.
No.
All right, motion is carried by 6-1. Thank you. Moving on to ordinances, Parks and Finance Administration Committee Agenda Bill 20080, ordinance updating the school impact fees pursuant to ordinance number 826 in chapter 20.10 of the Snoqualmie Municipal Code. This was introduced on the 14th and is ready for action tonight.
Move to adopt ordinance
1238.
updating the school impact fees pursuant to ordinance number 826 and chapter 20.10 of the Snoqualmie Municipal Code.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second to approve ordinance number 1238 as stated by Councilmember Mayhew. Is there any member of the public that would like to comment on this item prior to action? And again, I'll give a moment for the 5 attendees here tonight to, oh, and welcome Carol Peterson. I see she's joined us, wife of our former esteemed council member. If any one of you would like to speak to this item prior to action. All right, seeing none, we will go to any further discussion and debate on this item, council. I know you had an opportunity to discuss it at the last meeting. So hearing no further discussion, all those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed say nay. All right, motion is carried unanimously. All right, moving on to reports. Parks and Public Works Committee, Agenda Bill 20083, Resolution 1554, awarding a small works public works contract to and authorizing execution of a small works contract with Prime Electric Incorporated for the Railroad Avenue Crosswalk Enhancements Project. Parks and Public Works Committee.
Sorry, I had to unmute. Pulled a Brian there. Hold on. The project is a combination of two projects listed in the non-utility capital improvements plan. With the reference CIP numbers there. The intent of this project is to install pedestrian signals in the form of rectangular rapid flashing beacons to improve pedestrian safety. These RRFBs will be located along Railroad Avenue at 202 at the intersections of River Street and King Street and the mid-block crosswalk. Move to adopt resolution 1554, awarding a small works public works contract to and authorizing execution of a small works contract with Prime Electric Inc. for the Railroad Avenue Crosswalk Enhancement Project and authorize the mayor to sign.
Second.
All right, I have a motion and a second to approve Agenda Bill 20083 as stated by Councilmember Sunwall. Is there any member of the public that would like to comment on this item prior to action? I don't see any hands being raised. Again, there's a raise hand feature button in the app for any attendees or the public that are attending tonight. With that, then we'll go to discussion from the council. See no one from the public. Councilmember Shepherd, then Councilmember Jeans.
Actually, I think I get to weigh in first, right?
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Chair. Yes.
I know it's your first meeting. I get it.
Yeah.
This is a good news story all the way around. Improve public safety in an area that I'm very, very familiar with, and so I'm super excited about it. We've saved some money in part doing the scaling back. There may be a question about maybe a little bit of delay on this. We put it out for bid several months ago. Nobody bid on it. So per provision that allows for state law, we were able to go out and seek particular contractors to do this work. We worked with Prime, who did the initial work on sort of giving us a rough estimate on what it would cost to do this in the first place. We have scaled it back, I think, in the spirit of saving money and in the spirit of trying to make sure it's something that we can maintain well. So we will not be putting any electrical into the ground. We're working off of batteries and solar. And we will also, unfortunately, but I understand, not be putting recessed reflectors into the ground, mostly due to maintenance. But those two items in particular have saved us quite a bit of money. So that is, that in a nutshell. I think we're hopefully having it on time for Christmas season, maybe even coordinate it with our light ceremony. Who knows?
Councilmember Jeans and Councilmember Shepherd.
Can somebody tell me whether these flashers are flashing all the time, or is there some activation by vehicle or pedestrian?
Brian Kraus.
I was suffering from similar things as our other council members.
It's a Brian thing.
It must be. I don't know. Butterfingers. Yeah, so it's a pedestrian activated, Councilmember Jeans.
Okay, good.
All right, Councilmember Shepherd.
Yes, so since we started out budgeting this for $1.5 million and it's now scaled down to around $300,000, I was wondering, part of the explanation for the budget says that it's coming from current cash balances. And I think originally it was going to be several $100,000, but it went down to $100,000 that is going to be spent towards this project. My question is, when can we talk about the possibility of the savings of this going toward a ladder truck?
As we stated in the roundtable meeting, that would take place in January along with all the other non-utility CIP capital projects and programmatic projects.
Yeah, my concern is talking about a budget and not talking about all of the spending cohesively and just breaking it up into little segments of the bits of money that we have. I'd rather have this be part of the discussion.
I think the council member is quite aware that as much as we're talking about a savings, the loss of revenue during that same time frame, while this project has had some savings, the loss of revenue in that operating budget has been significantly greater. So there's really no net savings to debate or discuss. It just adds to our ability to cut costs to meet that lower revenue threshold. But again, happy to have the council discuss it more if they want. Councilor Jeans, did you have additional questions or comments? You're muted if you're, okay, I think he just left his hand up. Councilor Mayhew, go ahead.
Yeah, so I just have a question about, because I got confused in the council's staff report in the budget section. And so we're approving this project. Are we approving tonight specifically which fund or funds will pay it, or is that something that happens separately? Because we've seen that there's some indication in the budget section that would all go to Fund 310, which sounds wrong to me. But if we're not approving the specific funds tonight, which fund it's hitting, then I guess I don't need to have that resolved. So I'm just trying to be clear on whether that's part of what we're approving.
All right, thank you, Councilmember Mayhew. Brian or Robert, could you address that question, please? Brian Kraus or Robert? Yeah.
This is just the contract. I know Drew has some extra information on this. One side note that I did want to mention, though, to Councilmember Shepherd's comments is that there is some TIB grant money involved with this, and so any money that we receive on that grant cannot be used for anything else but this project. And Drew, did you want to elaborate a little bit more?
So sure, I think you make an excellent point, Robert. In fact, the Transportation Capital Fund is often built on our transportation taxes, which are generally restricted from using for other purposes. So I think that's one point to take away. On the other matter, for example, we believe that the Transportation Capital Fund was the appropriate funding source for this. It is basically a traffic signal that will be allowing people to cross on a crosswalk at a street, at an intersection, for example. And so we thought that was the appropriate location to pay this money out of. In essence, if you approve this contract, when we receive those invoices, we would be paying them out of Fund 310. That's what we intend to do.
So don't we have, and maybe I'm just confused on the facts. I thought that the city had received some mitigation money from developers, and that money was currently located in a fund which is not Fund 310. And so that's what I'm sort of driving at. Isn't some of the money, specifically the amount that's being funded from, is my understanding correct? There's an amount that's in a mitigation fund that's going to be applied to this and therefore not coming from 310.
So in essence, this is money that we haven't necessarily collected yet. So in essence, when we do receive that money, we would hope to receive it into Fund 310. There are other funds, such as the Snoqualmie Ridge Capital Mitigation Fund, which I don't necessarily have too much information on, that may allow for such expenditures, for example, but then we would maybe come back to you, for example, for a transfer into the Transportation Capital Fund to move that money into there if you're going to do something like that. But in essence, the the mitigation fees that we're talking about haven't necessarily been collected yet. And so
it'll all flow through Fund 310. Got it. Thank you very much.
Any other questions or comments on this item then? All right, with that then, all those in favor say aye.
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 Okay, all those opposed say nay. All right, the motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Council. Any other report for Parks and Public Works Committee? Councilmember Summel.
I don't believe so. I think we're good.
All right, Community Development Committee report.
We had the human services discussion. There's a presentation by Carson.
That is correct. I have some slides prepared. So whoever's controlling the presentation, if they could show those on screen, please.
Do we know that the person controlling has the slide deck?
I believe they should.
Okay, who's controlling, Kevin or Robert or who?
I think Mark, last time I saw.
Mark?
Yeah, I'm doing the slide deck. I was told that Carson had the presentation, so let me just find it real quick.
Well, or can you give the sharing to Carson and he can just.
Yeah, I did. I released my sharing to Carson.
Okay, I'll go ahead and do that then.
Right. Might be easier for you anyway.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, there we go.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. My name is Carson, and I'm here tonight to present the funding recommendations on behalf of the Human Services Advisory Committee. Our advisory committee members are Sarah Weisel, Ann Logelin, and Carol Peterson, and they're all in attendance tonight. And I hope to give them an opportunity to comment after the presentation. Deborah is also available to help answer questions and help me present if needed. So for the 2021-2022 biennium, the city received 14 applications for human services funding. And our deadline for application submission was on September 4th. And then pretty quickly, the advisory committee got to work going through the applications and grading them with the Human Services Funding Scorecard over the course of 3 different meetings. Mayor Pro Tem Mayhew was also in attendance to those meetings and can attest to the process as well. This was the same funding scorecard that was used in the previous biennium as well. So up on screen, you can see all the organizations that applied to the City of Snoqualmie Human Services funding. I have the funding that we allocated in 2020, if applicable, and then the funds requested for both the year 2021 and 2022, and the advisory committee's recommendation in both of those years. You can see that they have recommended funding on an annual basis anywhere from $1,000 to $50,000. And they agreed to fund 13 out of the 14 organizations that applied. A quick reminder for the funding priorities for human services in the city of Snoqualmie. We have food to eat and a roof overhead, supporting and preparing youth for success, a safe haven from violence and abuse, and physical and mental wellness, as well as healthy aging. So I've prepared a kind of summary broken up by those funding priorities to summarize each of the organizations that applied for each of those priorities. One other quick thing I wanted to mention on this slide is that we've been operating under the assumption that there's the budget for human services is going to stay the same as in 2020, and that figure is $232,287 per year in each year in the biennium. So in total, the recommendation for human services funding in 2021 is $226,287. And in 2022, that amount is $238,287. And between the 2 years, that averages out to the same amount of funding in 2020.
What was the 2020 funding?
$232,287.
And as Carson noted, council, that's based on a percentage that we've adjusted over the last few years according to a formula and comparative sort of investigations with our communities and cities. Note, this is a bit of a departure because, you know, we're making cuts in the general fund, but I gave direction to keep the human service funding at the same, at a minimum at the same level, just because it seemed to be a bit of a disconnect to during the COVID crisis when the human service agencies are getting increased demand on their budgets while some of their funding, the traditional funding, has been challenged. That just seemed an inappropriate place to make cuts. So it is a sort of a temporary departure from that formula.
Thank you, Mayor. Okay, so I'd like to go a little bit more into depth in each of these funding priorities and the organizations that applied to settle or to address each of these priorities, if you will. So the first up, we have food to eat and a roof overhead. We had 4 organizations apply under this funding priority. First up is Eastside Baby Corner. The Human Services Advisory Committee recommended funding to help them provide critical needs items for children, including diapers, formula, baby food, and clothing. Helping Hands Ministry provides financial assistance for individuals in need, and that can include a broad range of services from funding for food, rent, utilities, and gas, and so on. The Snoqualmie Valley Food Bank provides food for low-income residents and anyone suffering from food insecurity in the valley. And Snoqualmie Valley Shelter Services provides a winter shelter and resource center for the homeless. The total funding recommendation under this funding priority for 2021 is $74,000, and for 2022, it's $77,000. Our next funding priority is supporting and preparing youth for success. We had 4 organizations apply to address this funding priority, including Encompass, which provides child and family education and support programs, and Friends of Youth, which provides outpatient therapy for mental health and substance abuse for children. Snoqualmie Valley Community Network also provides similar services in child and family education and support. And the Trail Youth offers youth leadership and advocacy programs, as well as educational programs for youth. The total recommendation for 2021 is $99,057, and that figure for 2022 is $104,057. The next funding priority is a safe haven from violence and abuse. We had 2 organizations apply to address this funding priority, including LifeWire, which provides advocacy services for victims of domestic violence. This can range from one-on-one advocacy, the 24-hour helpline that they offer, as well as various support groups and youth advocacy and housing stability. Mama's Hands operates a full-time year-round shelter for women and children, which is the only full-time shelter for women and children in the Valley. The total recommendation for 2021 is $16,000, and
hello.
It's the same in 2022. Hello.
Right.
Hey, John.
Our next funding the last funding priority we have is physical and mental wellness, as well as healthy aging. We had 3 organizations apply to address this funding priority. CarePoint Clinic is the first one, and they provide free primary health care for uninsured and underinsured individuals. Mount Si Senior Center provides various senior programs that address health, nutrition, social and recreational opportunities, different educational courses and advocacy services, as well as transportation and low-income housing for seniors. And Skyview Community provides Learn to Swim scholarships for disadvantaged youth. The total funding recommendation for this funding priority totals $37,230 in 2021, and that figure for 2022 is $41,230. So this concludes kind of a broad overview of the organizations that applied and the different funding priorities that we have as a city. So at this point, I'd like to open it up for discussion amongst the council and comments from the public, and also from our advisory committee members.
I'll just ask for the members of the Human Services Advisory Committee, if as the council members ask any questions, you want to maybe add something or respond, go ahead and raise your hand and I'll recognize you. Councilor Mayhew, I'll call on you first since you are part of the liaison from the council to that committee. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to report to the council that as a liaison, I attended most of the meetings of this group, and we have, as we do with so many of our commissions and committees in the city, a fantastic group of residents who commit their time to this, and they take this very seriously. There is a very extensive scoring process. They went through that with us, you may remember 2 years ago in detail. They set up this scoring process a few years ago. At the same time, they were setting up those funding categories and prioritizations. And they are very focused on the accountability of these organizations, on the need and assessing what the need is, and really struggling with that. And then they're very focused on ensuring that the awards they recommend are not, there's no duplication. They look out for that and spend a lot of time on that. So the thought that went into this, the effort that went into this is just fantastic. And I just wanted to share that with you. I think we owe, regardless of what we decide to do with their recommendation, I think we owe a tremendous thank you to this group of people who have who've just done a great service for the city.
Thank you, Councilor Mayhew. Councilor Ross and Councilor Summerall.
So the Community Development Committee reviewed the Human Services Committee recommendations, and we agreed to move it forward to the council as proposed. The funding human services right now is critically important because of the high levels of unemployment and the impact of COVID. And we feel that these organizations will help our residents navigate through this during this difficult time. And I do have a tie to one of the organizations, so I will recuse myself from any voting.
Thank you, Councilor Summerall.
Yeah, I just want to thank Ann, Carol, and Sarah for putting in the time. I've several times during my tenure on council in the last few years have had the opportunity to, or curse perhaps sometimes, to disperse money. I have no concerns or questions about this. I know you guys have put in a ton of time and your rubric is fantastic. So thank you for what you've accomplished here. And I look forward to dispersing this money to these wonderful organizations.
Thank you, Councilor Summerall. I don't see any further hands up. Are there any of the attendees or members of the public or members of the committee that wanted to comment? All right. So if we could unmute Carol Peterson, please. Oh, yeah, unmute Carol Peterson, please. There you go, yeah. Carol. Go ahead, Carol.
Yes, I was kind of surprised that Matt Larson agreed to keep the money at the same level. I was very pleased because I have not followed the budget this year, but with the problem with the Salish Lodge income, I just assumed that it would be less. But of course, you recognize that with the unemployment and a lot of like the food bank, especially in the shelter, really is in need. I just wanted to point out why we did not fund the one that's on there that says 0. is because it was, I'm familiar with this. It's repetitive with let's see, the helping, let's see, which one was it? Yeah, not applicable. I thought there was something we didn't fund here. Anyway, it was because there's an organization who has not asked us, and I don't know if they ever will, called the Snoqualmie Valley Support for All. And what they're trying to do is what my husband and I tried to do in the 1970s when we first got all of these agents, not all of them, but many of them going, of which he and I were involved in about 6 of them, is that this agency now is trying to coordinate with a phone number and with some other sources so that when people are in need, it's easier for them to reach a decision and who's available. That's really been lacking. And there's so many groups that do, well, not necessarily similar things, but the people in need don't know where to go and who to call. And this new group that's forming that has been funded by the state up till now is going to be locally funded so they can do more. And that's what some of these Helping Hands Ministries, I think was the one. Anyway, that we turned them down because it was a duplication of, I don't even know if they know they're in existence and going. But we don't turn somebody down easily. And I was really glad that we could come out with right to the dollar on what Mayor Larson was suggesting. So it's been really interesting and it's a good committee. And I really thank Councilman Mayhew for coming because he gives us good input on what he thinks the council will want to know or have questions about. So thanks so much.
Carol, that was Love Snoqualmie Valley that the committee
right.
didn't recommend funding, but yeah.
Yeah, I thought that's, yeah.
Okay, so that makes more sense, Carol, because Love Snoqualmie Valley is sort of playing that role of being an umbrella organization where if you go to them with a need, they will direct you to a multiple of agencies. Those agencies, though, have gotten together and formed this community support for all that Carol mentioned.
Yes.
That group is the one that's kind of acting as, they want to basically have that front door where it's the one place people can go to. And then with the individual that receives them, it has more knowledge, intricate knowledge about those different human service agencies, can direct them to the right one or the right ones to meet their needs. So thank you, Carol.
Yeah.
All right. Anybody else from the public or from the committee that wanted to speak on that? All right. Go ahead, and Sarah, we'll unmute you as soon as we can. Let's start with Ann and then Sarah to unmute them if we could and allow them an opportunity to speak. Once we see your microphone icon, Ann, we'll know that you're unmuted. Or look around and make sure you have unmuted yourself. Well, first of all, I guess you got to make sure you have a microphone plugged in on your computer or something. There we go. Now we can, there we go. And
there we go.
There we go.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to mimic what Carol said. You know, everybody on the committee does a really good job. We work really hard to make sure that we look at every point of the applications, make sure that the applications are thorough and explain what it is that we're trying to do in the community. And, you know, we really, really thank all of the people involved from the city. And I think everybody does a great job. And thank you, Carson, for all your hard work.
Thank you, Ann. And
I'm not the one working hard. It's you guys.
I thought someone else had their hand up too. I think, was it Sarah? Sarah, did you have your hand up and then you put it back down? Or Sarah, go. Yeah, let's try and get Sarah unmuted.
Okay, just to add in, I wanted to say thank you, you know, to my committee members and to Carson and Deborah. As a committee, we worked really hard to score and review the applications, to work through our rubric. I believe the recommendations that we made, we came to very thoughtfully and intentional. And I also really look forward to see what these funds will do for our community. they'll make a big impact in some very needed areas, especially during COVID times. So thank you.
Thanks again. All right, I think everybody that's there has left their hands up, but I think they've all had an opportunity to speak. So with that, I'll come back to the council. Carson, did you have anything more to add, or any other questions or concerns at this time, council?
I think that about covers it, but I'd like to thank the advisory committee members for all their hard work, and also for being accommodating with our push to finalize the budget by end of September or around this time. They've agreed to meet 3 times throughout the month of September. So a lot of hard work went into these recommendations, and I'd like to thank them for that.
You're muted, Mayor. Can someone unmute the mayor? It doesn't look like he's able to do it. Kevin, or
yeah,
thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I couldn't unmute myself. Thanks for catching that. We were supposed to have a hand signal for that or something. I guess this works. Yeah, Carson, if you could then just unshare your presentation, and then I'll ask the chair of the Community Development Committee, is there any other report for that committee before we move on? Any other items? Councilmember Ross?
Yes. So today I forwarded out to all the council members the King County Regional Hazard Mitigation Plan and also the City of Snoqualmie Hazard Mitigation Plan that we will be reviewing at Community Development on October 5th, and then potentially at Council. So this gives you a week to a couple weeks to read through them. So thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Moving on to Finance Administration Committee, Agenda Bill 20085, Resolution 1555, approving the City of Snoqualmie's allocation for the Northeast King County Regional Public Safety Communications Agency, otherwise known as NORCOM, budget.
The NORCOM interlocal agreement to which the city is a party requires the city council approve the city's allocation Hold on. I seem to have a different summary statement. I'll start over. The NORCOM interlocal agreement to which the city is a party requires that the city council approve the city's allocation for NORCOM's budget each year by resolution. The allocation for 2021 is estimated to be $49,451. This amount is an increase of 5.37% from 2020. Move to adopt resolution number 1555, approving the City of Snoqualmie's allocation for the Northeast King County Regional Public Safety Communications Agency, NORCOM, budget.
Second.
I'm sorry, do I have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second to approve Agenda Bill 20085 as stated by Councilmember Mayhew. Is there any member of the public that would like to comment on this item prior to action? See no hands go up. Are there any questions or discussion, Council? Councilmember Ross and then Councilmember Shepherd. Councilmember Ross, go ahead.
Okay, so it's stating the allocation 2021 is estimated to be 49,451, but we're budgeting 52,108. Is that, would they be the same, or why are they different?
Robert, or who wants to take that?
I don't know where Robert is, Mayor. As far as the difference, Councilmember Ross, you're talking about the 2 different years, right?
No, I'm just saying what's in the summary statement.
Right.
2021 is 49,000, but the budget is 52,000. And I think we approve it annually, so.
Yeah, it's an annual amount. I'm not sure why. Maybe Chief Carrera can take the difference, but I can speak a little bit. Chief Carrera got some information today to answer some questions of why the increase. Chief or Robert, do you know specifically the difference why? Because of the resolution. But I can speak to the email you sent to me, Chief, on the reasons for the increase. But
yeah, no, I think what Councilmember Ross is getting at is the number should be the 52,000 number.
Yeah,
That is the correct number. That was they've been going through the budget with a fine tooth comb. They originally had a higher dollar amount, and then it was lowered. Where the confusion came was I believe I sent the city clerk the wrong number. I gave her the 2020 number, but the correct number is the 52,000 for this resolution.
Okay, do we require a motion to amend, or is that not necessary? I don't see it. I don't have it right up in front of me right now.
I believe the number in the resolution is correct.
Yeah.
Mayor, if I could comment, the incorrect number was in the summary statement.
Oh, okay.
The motion was to approve the allocation, which doesn't specify the amount, but based on the chief's comments is 52,108, which is different than the summary statement, but the motion didn't specify the amount, just that we approved the allocation.
So I don't think it needs any motion. Perhaps what I'll just ask is that Jody make sure that gets cleaned up. If there's no objection, we'll just make sure and make that correction in the summary statement when it goes into the record.
Mr. Mayor.
Mayor, also on this,
Bob, go ahead.
Just the resolution approving the allocation does state the 52,108 number.
right, and that's the purpose and the principles agreement that we have with Norcom is we pass a resolution and we do it before the budget. So then we will adopt the number in the budget that's appropriate. We're just resolving that we are going to pay our bill next year.
Right,
So you do have the right number in the resolution.
Councilmember Lassay and then Councilmember Shepherd.
All right, I meant to take my hand down. That answered my question as well.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Shepherd.
Yes, I noticed that we had included in there a statement from September and August. And in August, it was 9.7% increase. And then in September, it was 5.37% increase. So it seems like it's fluctuating. And this is an estimate, I guess, of what they anticipate will be the final number for the year. But I also went back. There was one of the documents that talked about how much we had spent in a prior year. And it was in 2007, the amount that we spent was just a little over $1,000 and 702 calls. And now we have some much larger number. And let's see, now we have 52,000 calls. So I'm having some questions as far as what happened between 2007 and 2020 in terms of how many calls we have and how the costs have changed so much.
I can try to answer that for you if you'd like, Mayor.
Go ahead, Chief. Thank you.
So I wasn't here in 2007. Obviously, that was the year that the interlocal agreement was established. And we've always had between 700 and 1,500 incidents per year. We've never had, I think you mentioned 50,000. I think that was just a slip with the dollar amount. But we've always fluctuated between that amount. The way they do their billing is a rolling average they look back over the past 10 quarters to come up with the average so that we can determine what our call volume is. Because that's what really builds the cost of our budget and what we're going to pay is the number of incidents that we go on and the number of incidents that we dispatch. I will say that in 2018, our cost was about $55,000, and then it lowered in 2019 because of some adjustments they had made to their budget. The dollar amount that you're talking about, Councilmember Shepherd, that was higher. That was approved earlier in the year, but the board, which we have a seat on, Rick represents the city on the board. They had approved the budget at $54,000, but asked if they could go back and make any more cuts to make it a little bit less painful for a lot of cities because a lot of the cities like ours is going through tough financial times. They actually went back and cut 4 additional positions out of the dispatch center, and that's what lowered it down to $52,000. So since I've been here, the dollar amount has ranged, and that's from 2014 on, has ranged between 45,000 and 55,000, being 55 being the highest, and now we're up to 52 for next year.
Thank you.
All right, I don't see anyone else's hand up for questions or discussions. So with that, all those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed say nay. All right, motion passes unanimously. Any other report for Finance Administration Committee?
No further report.
Public Safety Committee report.
No report.
All right, with that, we'll move on to Committee of the Whole. Council, or Mayor Pro Tem, you had a council liaison appointment issue you wish to discuss or bring up?
Yes, following up on a few meetings ago when the council asked me to look at not council committee assignments, but commission and advisory committee assignments. So there's one commission assignment that I had not brought back to you because I hadn't lined up a council member to do that. So tonight I am appointing and looking for your confirmation of appointment of council member Jeans to the Snoqualmie Arts Commission.
Do we have, right, I have a motion and a second to approve Councilmember Jeans as liaison to the Snoqualmie Arts Commission. Is there any further discussion, council? All right, hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed say nay. All right, motion passes. Congratulations, Councilmember Jeans. Thank you. Did you have a speech?
No, I'm good. I loved it before. I'll love it again.
Yeah.
COVID-19 update. Rick, did you want to jump in and say anything on CARES funds or anything?
Well, thank you, Mayor, council members. We're looking at our second round of CARES funds right now, CARES Act money. We had our initial kickoff meeting. Nicole is working with the groups to see about applications. And then we're going to circle back with another meeting once we get that underway. So there was some thought about what to do with the money. Obviously, keep it for or use it for nonprofit businesses, human services. Those were the three main buckets, if you will. So we're looking at that as well. It's $205,050 is exactly half from what the first round was. So we're in the process right now with CARES Act funding. As far as COVID-19, Chief can maybe chime in on the cases. I think our cases are very low up here. We still are doing a kind of a hybrid business model for our agency, people working from home, essential employees. They're working in their offices and their departments, and other staff can come to work as they see fit. There is no restriction. However, we are stressing masks, social distancing, washing hands, hand sanitizing, and City Hall still remains closed to the public. We're entering the winter time, so we don't really have a date when we will fully be staffing City Hall or some of the other facilities. But I'm working with that with Chief, make sure that we're watching it and what the governor does, CDC, the county, and all the entities together. But we're preparing for another helping as we go through, start the fall and the winter months. So that's kind of the update. I don't know if Chief wants to add anything to the COVID-19, but we're still following that protocol as we're moving forward.
Chief, did you want to add something on any metrics out there in the community, or?
No, our numbers still remain low. I keep an eye on them all the time. But yeah, we're still not below enough to go to phase 3, even in the Upper Valley. But we still remain with low numbers up here, which is good.
Great, thank you. And I'll just make a quick note, council, as we're quickly approaching October, you may be getting questions from members of the public about what's going to happen with Halloween. We did have a meeting today that I thought was pretty productive to maybe bring some clarity. I think the direction we're going is to put our emphasis on helping promote 3 fundamental activities that we're aware of. One is the ROA working with Remlinger Farms to buy pumpkins and have those available for pickup, or a little package for families that can pick those up. They'll put some information out about where that can be done. The 2 other big events are the retailers in North Bend, downtown Snoqualmie, the Ridge, and Fall City are kind of coordinating an event that will run from noon to 6 p.m. where kids and families can go to the retail areas and have opportunities to kind of pick up trinkets and prizes and things. Nicole, if she wants to add something to that, could give more detail, and jump from downtown to downtown retail area to retail area, and then from 6 to 8, Church on the Ridge is taking those Star Wars and Princess Castle and other things that they usually scatter around the neighborhoods, and they're doing it through the business park area, down center over by Bracken and Douglas Avenue. spreading those out for sort of a drive-through area where people, kids can drive through and they can deliver candy through a pipe and so forth. And so those will be the big issues. And then we know that there'll still be some families determined to go out and do the traditional trick-or-treating, which is considered by the CDC to be a high-risk activity and would be discouraged. But knowing that that will still probably happen, we're looking to at least direct people to the King County website, which is sort of borrowed from CDC on some recommendations for how to do that as safely as possible. There's a couple items we think they could add to that the Chief Carrera is going to reach out and suggest a couple of edits, so at least we're directing them to one site rather than ours and theirs. And things like, traveling one direction on the sidewalks, going the direction of traffic, or keeping road on your left, house on the right, or something like that. And ways to have kids approach stores or people to deliver candy in safer ways. So wanted to provide that information to you because I know that there may be members of the public approaching you and asking you about that. So city's not taking really a hard position on it. It's more that we're going to be referencing those external resources like the county. Chief Carrera, Nicole, did I miss anything there? You guys want to add anything to that? Okay. All right. Any other items from staff on COVID issues that I missed or that Rick or I missed? All right. With that, then I think we covered all the other items. We'll then go ahead and bring up or continue on the budget roundtable issues on the operating budget and see if we can kind of put a bow on that. Robert, I'll kick it back to you and then open it up for any additional questions from the council.
Thank you, Mayor. I believe Councilmember Jeans has his hand up, so
Yeah.
I'll get questions as we go along here.
Actually, this is probably a good time to make a couple of general comments. For the roundtable this evening, I think I am not unique in that we didn't have any material given to us either by Jim or Robert beforehand. So the roundtable, we had no idea what you were going to be talking about, what emphasis. It would certainly be helpful if we had some idea of where we're going and what materials, if you can provide materials for us or direct us toward materials that we've had before, so the focus can be better attuned for the roundtable. That's one comment. Second comment is we had a rather vigorous discussion this evening during the roundtable about police vehicles, kind of police vehicles out of replacement. And frankly, that should have been material that would have presented to the Public Safety Committee so that the committee could have discussed that and formed some view about that, and maybe could have given the chief some indications of kinds of things that we'd like to gather so we can make a more informed decision. So I'm asking for those kinds of things into the future. Thank you.
I think that's an excellent suggestion. I don't think the Mayor Pro Tem would object to. Let's just make a point to put that on the agenda for the next Public Safety Committee meeting, since that'll give Perry then an opportunity, or the chief opportunity to take a look at that and bring that back. And because it's on topic, I suspect the Mayor Pro Tem wants to respond to that, and then I'll come back to Councilmember Shepherd.
I was just going to say wholeheartedly agree.
All right, I thought you would. Thank you. Councilmember Shepherd.
Before, Mayor, I just want to answer.
Councilmember Jeans, did you have any other questions? And then I'll kick it to Robert to address the answer, and then I'll go back to Councilmember Shepherd.
I'm good.
Yeah, Councilmember Jeans, I just wanted to answer the first part of your question. So there is nothing new tonight. There's nothing we changed. So the packet you have is what you're discussing tonight. What I did send out, the only thing I showed, and I did email it right before the meeting tonight, is just the fund schedule for the other funds. But as far as the focus on the operating, what we're discussing, nothing has changed in the packet. I'd be happy if it'll help you just to go down the summary of these again, if that would help. Just to kind of get it more into context, I can definitely go down these again if you like.
Anything that will help cue me up for the roundtable.
Sure. Let's get the other questions answered, and then I can come back to that, Mayor.
Okay, Councilmember Shepherd and Councilmember Sunwell.
Yes, so I'd like to really get all of the testing on the fire hydrants, the pressure testing on the fire hydrants included. And I'd like to see all of them done in 1 year because we have gone a very long time without having that done. And I think that's a safety concern. And as far as the rest of the concerns that Chief Carrera had sent us in his email, as far as public works issues, as far as backup power and in order to turn off, the reservoirs and so forth, I think that we really need to review that and make sure that we incorporate that into this biennial budget.
All right, thank you, Councilmember Summerall.
Hey, I would just ask that the vehicle issue be brought up at Parks and Public Works as well, since ultimately those agenda bills come out of our organization.
Okay. I assume the staff responsible for the agendas for both the Public Safety Committee meeting and the Parks and Public Works Committee will make sure and get that ER&R issue on the police vehicles on the agendas for the next committee meetings. So, or Rick, could you make sure to address that with the staff tomorrow morning?
Yes, Mayor. I'll go ahead and add it to the list.
All right, thank you. Councilor Mayhew.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, it's because I agree with both of those committee chairs on their requests, and maybe there's a lesson here that we can take into future years. But maybe the ER&R fund, which currently goes through the F&A committee, maybe rethink that. Maybe that ought to be going through, maybe in its entirety, going through the Parks and Public Works Committee instead, and maybe obviously then the sub pieces, for example, for fire department and police department, maybe also ought to be going through those. So maybe there's a lesson to be learned here, and maybe staff could think about for future. Maybe we do the ER&R fund a little differently in the committees to make that work a little smoother.
All right. Councilor Summerall and Councilor Shippen.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea, Jim, except I actually sort of like how it is because we touch almost all the committees as it is. And I don't even know this was an oversight. I think it would have eventually gotten to us. I just think, given the time frame, I think it's very important that both committees talk about it. I actually love the fact that this spreads across three committees. And since it's sort of purse strings at its core, I think it makes sense that it sticks with your group, just as long as we, as Public Safety and PW, Parks and Public Works, gets briefed accordingly.
All right, Councilor Mayhew.
Yeah, it's actually further reflection. I agree with Councilmember Sunwell. This is a really tricky deal with the ER&R fund because there's the aspect of the vehicles that are purchased, so kind of the expenditures out of that fund. But then there's the whole aspect of how that then gets charged through, which is more kind of a F&A kind of concept and how that's hitting the different funds and so forth. So yeah, that's a good point. I agree with Councilmember Sunwell.
All right, Councilmember Shippen.
Yes, and I also want to make sure that we consider spending on a ladder truck before we spend on anything that's not critical as far as spending, because our safety is the highest priority over any of our council goals.
Councilor Summerall.
Yeah, maybe this is a committee discussion, but it's been a long time since I've heard the fire chief proactively discuss a ladder truck, which tells me that of all the many priorities he has, as awesome as it would be to have one, that's not a top priority. Now, if that's a misunderstanding, then let me know. But I just haven't heard you proactively talk about it in a while, which tells me it's really nice to have, but just not essential in these times.
I'm not sure if you would agree with that, but
yeah, I'm trying to respectfully figure out how to answer that question. I felt that you guys were all informed about this enough where I didn't have to advocate on it anymore, but I can certainly continue to do that. But I do recognize the challenges in the city.
You've heard about the squeaky wheel getting the grease, right, Chief?
Yeah,
we have a lot of squeaky wheels around here.
That's why Phipps has more vehicles than you have.
Yeah, I know. No, my impression has been that I've concluded that the council pretty much as a whole across the board knows this is a high priority. It's just not it's $1 million item. I mean, this is not an easy lift, so we've been patiently giving the chief an opportunity to go for some grants. I think without, doing due diligence to at least try to find OPM before we use our money would be irresponsible. So, our preference would be to get that, but if the grants fall through, that at the end of the day, we're gonna have to figure out how to get that done. I mean, we've got the hotel, the panorama apartments, and other, the new high school. We've got a considerable number of multi-story buildings now that we didn't have a little more than, 4 years ago. So times have changed, but Councilmember Shepherd, I know the entire council knows this is an issue. So I think I would hope the chief would know that the council knows this is a priority too. Councilmember Mayhew. And then Councilmember Lassay. I'm actually Councilmember Lassay. He's been dominating the whole meeting, but in the spirit of round robin, I want to give Councilmember Lassay an opportunity here. Go ahead.
Thanks, Mayor. I just wanted to reiterate, Chief Carrera, your memo to the Public Safety Committee, I think spelled out very clearly your continued advocacy for a ladder truck, that we are in need of one, and it's just a matter of how do we figure out getting one. And I think that memo was really good about explaining that you're going to come back to us in January when we start talking about reassessing some of these issues, that we'll need to take a really hard look at it. And so I don't think, I would hope that my fellow council members would not see your maybe more recent silence about the issue as being well, we're just going to have to resign not to, or it's not important. But I think it is important, and you've made it clear. And although the squeaky wheel does get the grease, you don't necessarily have to cry wolf all the time to get what you're looking for.
All right, Councilmember Mayhew and Councilmember Shepherd.
Yeah, I was just going to say something similar to what Councilmember Lassay said, and I would just point out I had seen that the chief had sent a memo that talked about this to the Public Safety Committee a few weeks ago, and I myself, I only got a chance to read that today. I was kind of kicking myself that I hadn't read it earlier. Part of the reason I didn't read it is I was very aware of the need, but I thought that, for any of you that haven't had a chance to read it, I thought the chief laid out very well exactly why this issue is becoming even more significant. And it has to do with some of the things that have gone with jurisdictions around us and response times. And I thought I found it very informative and helped me understand it really well. So, and then I would just remind everyone that the ER&R fund is building up about half the cost, because it's about half the cost of a ladder truck is what it would take to replace the current fire truck, so that's being replaced through the charge out. So it's not that we're doing nothing, but we have to find that additional amount to get up to the ladder truck. So yeah, that's all.
We're hopeful we can buy at least a half a truck next year. So. Councilmember Shepherd.
Okay, so I really feel strongly that we need to make this a higher priority, bring it into our discussion as far as how we spend money earlier, as in this year, not wait till next year. Because if we don't, the longer we go, the more decisions we make, the less money we're going to have in order to put toward a truck. And I think we really got to make a really big push to get that truck purchased.
All right, thank you. Any other comments or discussion, council?
This is Robert. I just wanted to chime in one thing. And I know there was a couple ideas out there as far as additional spending. We do not have a forecast at this point. I can say it's good. I mean, we have a lot going on. We're still waiting for
Robert, could you, once you turned your video off, your audio is becoming garbled, so maybe it'll clean it up if you turn the video off.
I'm sorry, is that better? It's been pretty slow.
That's much better. Today. Thank you.
Thank you. No, I just want to make the point, the revenue picture will change at the end of the year. I can't guarantee if it'll go up or down. We're still waiting for the August sales tax numbers to come in. We're still waiting to look, how the national economy is going to do before the end of the year. There's a lot of other questions like the Affordable Care Act, that's going to be potentially overturned by the Supreme Court, what that would do to us. So as far as adding new spending at this point, it's a recommendation of the administration you will have another opportunity later on. But at this point, we would have to reduce somewhere in expenditures to offset. And maybe Rick wanted to elaborate on that a little bit more, but we would have to find somewhere else to reduce to add other items into the budget at this point. We tried our best to balance the budget, and even so, you can see on the beginning chart here with the best guess of expenditures or revenues we did in May before we went through a slow summer. You can see that we still have that expenditures are over revenues for the first year of the biennium. So adding any expenditures at this point to that could make the situation worse for the city. Just want to put that out there. Now we can make, if the council wants to make modifications elsewhere, reduce elsewhere to expand one item, to reduce another item, we can definitely look at that if you'd like.
Councilmember Shepherd.
Okay, so I feel that it's really a big safety problem. And I think that we need to consider doing a moratorium on any structures that's over 2 stories tall if we're not able to bring a ladder truck into the city.
Okay. All right. A moratorium wouldn't pay for a truck. It wouldn't exacerbate the problem anymore. I mean, we already know we need one for multi-story buildings, and it would probably curtail additional revenue. So for what Robert just said, Councilor Shepherd, I guess as we finalize the budget, I would ask you to go through the budget and specify what $500,000 worth of items would you cut, additional $500,000 would you cut in capital projects or operations in order
I
to
have identified the $1 million that they saved on that one project that we talked about today.
Okay. What about the $1 million of revenue that disappeared in the last few months that corresponded with that savings? There is no savings.
Well, we need to look at what we've used for that money for instead.
Councilmember Shepherd, I don't know, it was said twice. There was not $1 million saved. There simply wasn't.
There was a 1.5 million budgeted.
Budgeted for stoplights.
And what? Wait a minute. 1/3 of that was, no, 2/3 of that money was somebody else's money. So
Right.
any savings there went to somebody else.
Yeah, the only savings would have been about, the only amount would have been 1/3 of that. Well, not 1/3, but yeah, to their point, some was coming from developer mitigation that could only be spent at those intersections for traffic control devices. Otherwise, if we don't build anything, the developer never pays it. The other was from a transportation improvement board grant. And then the remaining 1/3, at least for the cost that we're facing now, was from city funds itself. So it wasn't the total 1.5 or whatever was the original number.
Hey, Matt.
Anyway, we can't resolve that tonight. I think we've already discussed it. We've stated that has to go into the discussion in January. Go ahead, Councilman Hawley.
Well, the only thing that occurs to me is we actually did spend some of that mitigation fund earlier on downtown. We got concurrence from the developer to do that. In our discussions of the mitigation funds for these lights, can we also broach the subject of would they maintain their complete mitigation and could we use that for public safety? And maybe, I don't know if Quadrant will go for it, but in this time, we can always ask.
I think I know the answer Bob Sturbank would give to that. Slim to no chance, but we could always ask, yeah.
Right. You would need to amend some of the project documents to allow for that, because right now that mitigation is strictly limited to signals.
Yeah, and they've already felt like they've been bled to death on mitigations throughout the entire Snoqualmie Ridge project. They're not in a mood to voluntarily give money away that they don't need to. Councilman Lissay, and then Councilman Ross.
Well, I just was going to mention that I think what's important to note here is that even though something's budgeted, the expenditure never happened because the revenue wasn't there to make that expenditure. You know, the mitigation funds were available, but the cost of the work without the revenue there to back it up, it wasn't going to happen. So I think what's important here is that we're focused on what the need is now. Chief Carrera has made that clear. And we need to work towards doing that. If it happens in early 2021, if we can afford it, then we'll do it. If we can't, then we'll try to figure out where we can to make it affordable, because that is important. And we've just got to find a way to make it happen.
All right, Councilor Ross, and then Councilor Summel.
So I agree with tabling it until January, till the council retreat. But I know that Chief Carrera is probably looking for numerous grants. And with low interest rates, there's also potential that we could, possibility of financing it as well.
Yeah, I'm doing a bond. Councilmember Sunwell.
I will pass.
Okay. Councilmember Mayhew.
I was just going to say, the thing I find the most frustrating about this conversation is this premise that it's this or that. It's not. There's no choice in front of us to do safety crossing signal lights downtown and getting a ladder truck. There's not a choice between one or the other, and it's false to present it that way. This is an important item, and it's a capital budget item, and we're going to take up the capital budget in January, and we're all very aware of this need. And I think the rest, frankly, I don't think that we're helping the conversation right now by implying that there's somehow some choice to be made here of this or that. There isn't.
Councilmember Shepherd.
So somewhere along the line, we decided to put the capital budget somewhere out in the future instead of having it done earlier. And my concern is that it really needs to be our top priority.
I think the council expressed it's a priority to wrestle with how to spend $14 million on $30 million of need. And the ladder truck is one of the $15 million or that we don't have of a number of public safety and other critical issues for capital around the community. And the difference between a ladder truck and maybe a piece of infrastructure like a parkway grind and overlay is that parkway grind and overlay, if you, let's say if it was those two you were choosing between.
Mayor, point of order. Councilman made a statement, doesn't necessarily necessitate a debate.
All right, I'll sustain and correct myself. Any further discussions or issues, council?
If not, I move to adjourn.
All right. Motion. I have a motion, a second to adjourn the meeting. Is there any discussion or debate about adjourning? All right. Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, motion is carried. Meeting is adjourned. Enjoy your evenings.
Night.
Night.